Hello, everybody. We are starting the Oceania unit. Today, we're going to talk and focus mainly on Australia, at least for the first couple of days. Um, and Australia is probably the largest part of Oceania. It's what you think about. However, Oceania is a much bigger place than just Australia. Here's Australia, which is a continent. It is a very large place. However, if you look at the rest of Oceania, whether it's some islands up to the north and countries to the north, or it is all these islands out here. You can fit a lot of Australias out here in these islands. So we're talking about a very big place. So it's all the islands that surround the continent of Australia, the Water Islands. So what is Australia? Well, it's unique because it's both a country and a continent. It will always be a continent. It's a big place. It's a big chunk of land. However, it may not always be a country, right? Somebody could take it over. They could have a civil war and split up into a whole bunch of different countries. Just depends on what happens in the future. Right now, the way it looks, it's going to be a continent and a country for a long time. But you never know. Those things can change. When you look at how big Australia is, it's a big place. That's why it's a continent and not an island. It stretches all the way up from the Hudson Bay up in the far north, and all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and from the east coast to the west coast. So we're talking about a very large area. The first people in Australia were the Aborigines. A lot of scientists, archaeologists believe that they arrived there over 10,000 years ago. Some people will say they've been there for 30,000 years. The Aborigines themselves say that's where they were created. That's where they started off. So it's all perspective. It's all belief systems. A lot of people believe that during the last ice age, when the water level was very low, because all the water was locked up in glaciers, people just walked there from nearby islands. There's other theories that they took boats, but once again, we don't know for sure. It's all just theories. We just know that the Aborigines have been there for at least 10,000 years. We'll talk about some of the tools of the Aborigines. The bull roarer, that you can see a link later on. This was a device used to communicate. It was a carved stone that they put a rope on, and they would twirl around their heads. It would make this noise, and it was kind of like a Morse code, or a code of some sort with the telegraph where it's beeping. Only they were swinging it around. It could create different sounds as they were swinging it that could kind of relay messages over long distances. Another important tool for the Aborigines over time was the boomerang that we'll learn a little bit more about. We have a video on it. We think of this kind of as a toy now, right? Something you throw and it comes back to you. But the Aborigines used it as a hunting tool, kind of these chunks of wood that they would throw and try to knock out an animal or maybe break a leg so that they could go and finish it off. So it was a weapon for hunting. When we think of the ones that fly around and come back to you, those probably weren't used as often. But essentially, what they did with those is they'd throw them high up in the air, and they'd go far, and then they'd come back, and they looked like a bird of prey. So animals or other birds might be kind of spooked because you got a bird of prey up above them, and they would head in a certain direction where maybe they had hunters posted waiting for them. The didgeridoo that you'll also learn about in a video link later on is an instrument that they can play, and you can play for a very long time. The way they breathe, they're breathing in as they play it, and so they can kind of just keep going and going and going. They believe that by playing this at ceremonies, they can enter dream time, which dream time is their theory of the creation of the world, and it's kind of like future, present, and past all rolled up into one. It's kind of difficult to understand, but that's their idea of creation, and it kind of transports them during these ceremonies to this other world, almost this other dimension. But that is their theory of creation is dream time, when everything was created. And the didgeridoo that they play, that we'll see a video link on later, is related to that. Notice the hair on this Aborigine kid over here. It's blonde and it's not dyed. A lot of Aborigines, a lot of Pacific Islanders, especially in Micronesia, even though they have dark pigmented skin, will have lighter hair, which has kind of baffled geneticists for a long time. So if you see pictures of these, and as they get older, it may darken up a little bit their hair. You see that with some kids sometimes. They have blonde hair. As they get older, it darkens up. Sometimes it doesn't for these kids. But if you see that, don't think that they dyed their hair. That's natural. That's the way they were born. Now, just like in the United States, where we have lots of different Native American groups throughout the continent, North and South America, they have lots of different Aborigine groups with slightly different cultures and different belief systems all across Australia. And just like one of the issues with Native American groups in the United States, culture and languages are dying off, and they're seeing the same thing in Australia, where a lot of these cultures and languages have died off. The first Europeans to arrive in Australia were the Dutch, and some sailors in the early 1600s spotted it and reported back to Europe that there was this other land down there, down under. The first guy to actually really map everything and kind of report back with good details was James Cook in 1770. And shortly after this, Great Britain is going to start to colonize Australia. Down here on the map, you can see some different routes that Cook took, but the Endeavour, this red line here, the ship, the Endeavour, is going to cross and explore around 1770 down in this region. Early on, some of the first colonies that the British set up were prisons. So oftentimes Australia gets kind of this reputation as being a rough place. But over time, there's going to be more and more colonies that are not prisons. But you can see the first English colony was set up in 1788. There was a big push to colonize Australia because in 1783, the Revolutionary War had ended and they had lost the American colonies. So now there was the push, we need to start colonizing somewhere else. What is really going to bring a lot of people to Australia is they find gold. It led thousands of Europeans to Australia looking for gold. Most did not find it. Some did. Some became very rich. Most did not. And they end up just staying there and colonizing and living in Australia. So that's what brings a lot of people there. Now, this was bad news for the Aborigines, similar to as Americans start moving west, it's bad news for the Native Americans. Very similar histories as far as they weren't immune to a lot of European diseases or Eastern Hemisphere diseases, smallpox, things like that. There was mistreatment as they were moved off their land. When the Europeans arrived, there was over 300,000 Aborigines, and as they started colonizing, they were almost wiped out completely. Australia will gain independence from Great Britain in 1901, but they are still part of the British Commonwealth, the different countries that are former British territories that still have a link and still view the Queen or the royalty of Great Britain as their royalty. Some physical features now of Australia. One thing you're going to notice is a good chunk of Australia is not very livable. It's very inhospitable. That in the center areas is lots of desert and dry territory. So most people you're going to find are going to live along the coastal area. Down here we find a temperate climate, and then as you go farther north, you're getting closer to the equator, so it gets warmer, and you're going to get into a tropical climate. Their mountain range is not super tall. It's old. It's been weathered down. So you're not going to see a lot of snow-capped peaks and things like we saw in the Himalayas or some other mountain ranges. This is located in the eastern region of Australia, the Great Dividing Range, and this is going to cause a little bit of a rain effect as the clouds and everything are going over the Great Dividing Range. It's going to rain a lot on the coast, and then once you get past the mountains, we find this real dry area over here. The real dry kind of wilderness area in the center of the country is known as the Outback. Most of you have probably heard about the Outback, whether it's the Outback Steakhouse or some other um, some other stuff about Australia. You've seen it in movies, maybe. But a large portion of Australia is very wild, and in some parts very barren. And this is the Outback, where not a lot of people live. You can see here, pretty good chunk of the Outback, very dry, very few people. Make sure you got plenty of gas and plenty of water. Australia has 10 deserts that are named, and they're located throughout the outback. The largest is the Great Victorian Desert down here. Actually, it might be the Great Sandy Desert. Yeah, the Great Sandy Desert, second largest desert in Australia, located north of the Gibson Desert, west of the Tanami Desert, but big desert here. And then the Great Victorian is the largest desert located in the south. This is maybe one of their more iconic images. We'll see a video on it later, a reading on it later, but Ayers Rock, also known as Uluru, and it's located in the Great Victorian Desert. And this is a very sacred place to Aborigines. This is a giant monolith, so it's kind of like an iceberg. That most of the iceberg is below the water. Most of this rock is below ground, so it's just huge, huge rock where the land's been weathered away around it. And it's a lot bigger than it looks. These are all big trees that you see here. Here you can see the road system, the freeways. The Great Barrier Reef is the world's largest coral reef, probably just as iconic or more known than Uluru, and it's located off the northeast coast up in the Coral Sea, and this is one of the largest organisms on the planet with all these coral built up next to each other, and it runs over 1,000 miles. So what is coral? It's a plant-like animal. They do not make their own food like plants, but they kind of reproduce like plants. They're made up of these tiny polyps. Here you can see low tide. This is what it as the water drops down. Low tide, the coral reef sticks up above the water. Most of the time, though, it's below the water. And it's a big ecosystem, right? The small fish live in there. The bigger fish can stick around on the outside and prey on those fish, and the even bigger fish outside of that. Probably saw it on Finding Nemo if you've seen that film. Now, Australia is known for kind of some unique animals, or animals that you won't find anywhere else in the world, or animals like them anywhere else in the world. Maybe their most famous animal is the kangaroo, which is a marsupial. What is a marsupial? It is a mammal with a pouch. Now, kangaroos are not the only mammal with a pouch. Koala bears are a marsupial. We oftentimes don't think of a koala bear as a marsupial, but here you can see the mother with a baby in the pouch. Wombat is another marsupial. You can see their pouch looks a little different. And some different marsupials. What was that one with the big ears? A bilby. It's a bilby. Kind of like a rat with big ears. These are all the marsupials. The gray-headed flying fox is a bat that's a marsupial. Here they are. The heat wave, we'll might see a video later on where they talk about the fires and everything that were happening in Australia, how hot it was getting. It was killing off these giant bats, these flying foxes as they call them. Some other unique animals, you got the duck-billed platypus, which is one of two mammals on Earth that lays eggs. It is not a marsupial, but it is one of two mammals that lays eggs. The emu, giant bird, smaller than the ostrich, also native to Australia. And Australia is known for having some of the deadliest animals in the world. The box jellyfish off the coast kills more people per year in Australia than sharks and crocodiles combined. They do have some of the largest crocodiles in the world, some that are 18 to 20 feet long. And then also great whites, if you want to study great whites or see great white sharks in the summer months off the coast of Western Australia, you can see those. Actually, I think it's Eastern Australia. But there's only been 27 deaths from great whites in the history of Australia. So you can go swimming and probably not have to worry about a great white shark. They also have some of the deadliest spiders in the world, including the deadliest spider, the funnel spider. It creates this giant web, and this spider will hide in there, and animals will think it might be some type of a tunnel to go hide in, some type of a little cave to go hide in, and the funnel spider is waiting for them in there. They also have some of the world's deadliest snakes. And so having some type of anti-venom, whether it's spider anti-venom or anti-venom for snakes, is kind of a part of life, especially in rural areas of Australia. And then the dingo is a wild dog that lives in Australia. It's less wild than a wolf, but it's not domesticated. They are a problem. We'll have a rating on the dingoes later. They've built a giant fence that's over 1,500 miles long that's trying to keep the dingoes out of southeastern Australia. Camels are not native to Australia, but they are domesticated there and wild there, as many camels were released and they've done well and they live in the outback. And so they're wild camels now after several generations. But there's also domesticated camels and they do well in the dry climate. So, yes, you can go see wild camels in Australia. You can see where all the camels are living in the outback, and there's nobody to bother them. Had a song here. I don't know if it'll play. You've probably heard it. I don't know if it's even recording, but I can hear it. All right. So why is it called Land Down Under? Well, it's very far south. It's the farthest continent that it's the only continent that is not north of the equator at all, and so all of it is far south of the equator. So it's our southernmost continent on the planet. Next time, we'll finish this and we will talk about Australian culture.